The first time I heard the crunch, I thought it was thunder, like some weird summer storm rolling through early. Then I smelled it. Hot rubber, churned dirt, that sharp green smell you only get when something living gets ripped apart. I stepped onto my front porch in socks, half awake, and there it was. My hedge. Not a hedge, like some fancy estate, either. Just a row of boxwoods I'd planted with my own hands when I bought the place. Back when my back didn't complain and my life still felt like it might go in a straight line. That hedge was my line in the sand. It said, right here, this is where the world ends and my peace begins. And now it looked like somebody drove straight through it like it was a suggestion. 2 bushes flattened, branches snapped clean, soil clawed up like a dogfight, and tire tracks so deep you could have poured cereal into them. I stood there staring, doing that thing you do when you know you're about to get mad, but you haven't decided if you're allowed to be mad yet. Because that's the game, right? The world tells you, don't make a fuss, be reasonable, don't be that guy. And for a long time, I was good at that. I'm Caleb Rhodes. I'm a mechanic in a small town outside Greenville, South Carolina. The kind of town where people wave with 2 fingers off the steering wheel and then gossip about you at the grocery store 5 minutes later. I'd been in my little ranch house for 12 years, kept to myself, fixed engines, fixed lawnmowers, fixed whatever anyone brought me, and tried to keep my life quiet. That hedge was part of the quiet. So I cleaned it up, replanted what I could, and told myself it was probably some drunk teenager cutting a corner. Then it happened again. 3 nights later. Same sound, same smell, same damage. This time, there were little shards of black plastic stuck in the leaves, and a strip of chrome like something peeled off a bumper. And that's when my brain did what it always does when it's trying not to panic. It started building a puzzle. Those pieces weren't from a Honda Civic. They were from something heavier, something higher off the ground. A truck, maybe an SUV, something with money. I asked around. Neighbor across the street shrugged and said, "That's wild, man." Like he was talking about a raccoon in a trash can. Old Mrs. Baines, the lady who sits on her porch every evening like she's guarding the whole street, just shook her head and said, "Happens when folks think they own everything." I called the township office. The woman on the phone sounded like I was interrupting her lunch. She suggested I move the shrubs back. Like the shrubs were the problem. Like I had planted them in the middle of a highway. I hung up and stood in my kitchen looking at the wall calendar with grease smudges on it. And I felt something hard settle in my chest. I realized whoever was doing this wasn't careless. They were consistent. They waited until I was gone or asleep. They came in clean, hit the same spot, and disappeared. That's not an accident. That's pressure. That's somebody trying to teach you a lesson without saying the lesson out loud. And I'll be honest, part of me wanted to pretend I didn't understand. Because if you understand, you have to decide what kind of man you are. The kind who swallows it, or the kind who stands up and gets labeled difficult. And I'd been labeled enough in my life. People see a quiet man, a man who works with his hands, who lives alone, who doesn't show up at the neighborhood cookouts, and they decide you're either harmless or weird. Sometimes both. Harmless is convenient for them. Weird is funny for them. Either way, they don't see you as someone who will bite back. That night, I sat at my workbench in the garage staring at a handful of rebar and a bag of quick-set concrete I'd picked up just in case. And I started laughing, quiet, bitter. I remember thinking, if you want to run me over, you're going to have to actually meet the ground I stand on. I didn't build a trap. Let me say that clear, because folks love to twist words. I didn't dig a pit. I didn't lay spikes. I didn't set anything out to hurt a person. I did what any tired mechanic would do when something keeps breaking. I reinforced the weak point. I pulled the damaged bushes, dug deeper than anyone would expect, and set in a line of rebar posts like ribs under the soil, then packed the base with stone and concrete so the roots had something solid to hold on to. From the street, it still looked like a hedge, just green and ordinary. Underneath, it was stubborn. I finished after dark with a headlamp on, hands cramping, and when I stood up, I felt this weird calm. Like I'd finally stopped asking for permission to protect what was mine. 3 nights later, around 2:13 a.m., I heard it. Not the crunch this time. The engine first, low, slow, prowling, like a big animal walking through tall grass. I moved to the front window, peeled the curtain back an inch, and there it was. A glossy black SUV creeping along the curb with its headlights off. Who drives without headlights on a residential street unless they're up to no good? It paused right where my Hedge started, like the driver was measuring the angle. Then the engine revved. The SUV lunged forward. And the sound that followed. It wasn't leaves snapping. It was metal folding. It was a deep, stomach-turning crash, like someone dropped a toolbox down a flight of stairs. The SUV hit the Hedge and stopped dead, front end crumpled like it kissed a wall. Steam hissed up. Something clanged and rolled across my driveway. The driver's door flew open, and a man stepped out cussing like a preacher who just missed a step. Tall, broad, expensive jacket. His posture screamed, "I'm used to winning." Even from my porch light, I could see him limping slightly, trying to act like pain was beneath him. When he turned, I recognized him. Not personally, but by reputation. Nolan Pierce, local developer. The kind of guy whose picture shows up in the paper holding giant novelty checks, smiling next to town officials. Everybody knew he was buying up land around our area, trying to push some revitalization corridor that mostly meant new storefronts and higher taxes. He stared at his wrecked SUV, then at my Hedge, then at my house like he expected a butler to come out and apologize for the inconvenience. I stepped onto my porch slowly, hands visible, voice calm. "Evening," I called, like he'd just pulled in for a friendly visit. He whipped his head toward me, eyes blazing. For half a second, he looked scared. Then his face hardened into that expression rich men wear when they realize they're not in control. "What the hell did you do?" he snapped. I raised my eyebrows. "Me? I planted bushes, sir." He took a step forward, winced, and tried to hide it. "You reinforced it," he said, spitting the word like it was illegal. I shrugged. "You keep running it over." Seemed like the bushes deserved a fighting chance. That's when I noticed something else. On the passenger seat, a leather portfolio had fallen open. Papers spilled out onto the floorboard and the pavement. Blueprints, site plans, color-coded lines, maps with little boxes that looked like property lots. He scrambled to shove them back in, quick and panicked, like a man trying to cover a hand of bad cards. And in that scramble, one sheet slid across the streetlight just enough for me to see my own address printed on it. Not handwritten. Printed. Clean. Like it was already decided. My stomach dropped. This wasn't about a Hedge. This was about my land. Nolan jabbed at his phone, fingers shaking, and barked into it. "Get here now." Then he pointed at me like I was the criminal. "This doesn't end well for you," he said. I smiled a little, because sometimes a smile is the only thing that keeps you from yelling. "Funny," I said. "That's what I was just thinking." The tow truck came. A couple of men in work vests showed up. Nolan didn't say another word to me, but his eyes did. Those eyes promised paperwork, promised consequences, promised that he knew people. I went inside and sat at my kitchen table with a beer I didn't even taste, staring at the wall like it might answer me. And all I could think was, I'm not crazy. I'm not paranoid. I'm just finally seeing it. The next morning, there was an envelope in my mailbox with no stamp, no return address. Inside was an offer to purchase my property at a price that looked generous on paper. But the wording wasn't friendly. It wasn't neighborly. It was cold, polished, full of legal muscle. It said I had 10 days to respond. 10 days. Like they were doing me a favor. I laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen, because it was so obvious now. They'd been trying to soften me up, make my life annoying enough that I'd fold. That afternoon, someone left a brick on my porch. Wrapped around it was a note with 6 words. Take the check, or lose more. That's when the humor dried up. That's when it got personal. I'm not a tough guy. I don't walk around looking for fights. But I know what intimidation looks like. And I know what it does to a person if you let it. It shrinks your world. Makes you second-guess every sound at night. Makes you hate your own home. They wanted that. They wanted me small. So I started getting smart. I installed cameras. Cheap at first, then better ones when the cheap ones mysteriously stopped working. I replaced the short screws in my doors with long ones that sink into the frame. I moved my truck into the garage every night. And I did what nobody expects a guy like me to do. I went through public records. Because mechanics read patterns. We troubleshoot. We don't always wear suits, but we know how systems work. I drove to the county office, asked for permits, zoning changes, project filings, anything related to Pierce Development Group. The clerk looked bored until she saw the company name. Then she looked nervous. You'll need to submit a formal request, she said. I smiled. Sure, I said. Let's do it. It took hours. I sat in that fluorescent-lit room with a stack of papers, flipping pages, highlighting things, feeling my blood pressure climb. Then I found it. A preliminary development agreement filed 7 months ago. It listed parcels secured for redevelopment, including mine. Secured. Like it was already theirs. Like my signature was just a formality they planned to force later. I stared at that line until my vision blurred, not from tears, but from rage. And right then my phone buzzed. A notification from my camera app, motion detected in the driveway. I pulled up the feed and saw a guy in a hoodie crouched near my truck's rear tire, hand working by the fuel line. My body moved before my brain finished thinking. I was out the back door, barefoot again, this time holding a tire iron, and I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I clicked the porch light on and let him see me. He froze. I took 2 steps closer and said, quiet as a confession, "Who sent you?" He tried to run. I swung low and hooked his ankle. He went down hard, grunting. I wasn't proud of it, but I wasn't sorry either. I held the tire iron near his shoulder, not touching, just close enough to make the air feel heavy. "Who?" I repeated, "sent you." His breath came out in quick panicked bursts. "I don't know, man," he said. "A guy named Bennett. He pays cash." Bennett. That name meant nothing to me, which told me everything. It was a middleman, a layer, a shield. I let him go. And before he limped off, I said, "Tell Bennett the next time he sends somebody, I'm not asking questions." He nodded like his neck was made of rubber and disappeared into the dark. That night, I made copies of that development agreement. I scanned it. I emailed it to a local reporter I'd gone to high school with, a city council member who hated Pierce but never had proof, and a lawyer I knew who'd previously told me, politely, to stop complaining. I also mailed a hard copy to myself, certified, because if you're going to play with sharks you better learn how to keep receipts. And I sat there, waiting, knowing I'd just thrown a match into a room full of gasoline. The story hit the news 2 days later. Not front page, but big enough that people started whispering. Pierce Development accused of filing on unsold land. Questions raised about redevelopment corridor. Suddenly, the same town folks who shrugged at my hedge were messaging me like we were best friends. That's how it goes. When you're the quiet guy getting pushed around, you're invisible. When you might have proof, you're fascinating. Nolan Pierce didn't come himself after that. He sent a man in a suit. Mid-40s, perfect hair, eyes like iced tea. He showed up at dusk, walked up my driveway like he owned it, and knocked like he was doing me a courtesy. I opened the door just enough that he could see my face. He smiled politely. "Mr. Rhodes," he said, "I'm Carter Wynn. I represent certain interests in the corridor project." I almost laughed. "Certain interests," I repeated. That's a cute way to say Nolan Pierce. His smile tightened. "This doesn't need to be adversarial," he said. A fair offer was made. I leaned on the doorframe, casual, like we were chatting about the weather. "You mean the offer that came with a brick and a threat?" His eyes flickered, just for a second. "We can't control what overzealous parties do," he said. That was his mistake. He said we. He caught it too late. I let the silence hang there like a bad smell. Then I said, "You folks ever notice how the overzealous parties always show up right when the paperwork says my land's already secured?" His jaw worked. He tried to stay smooth. "If you continue resisting," he said, "you'll find that life becomes inconvenient." I nodded slowly. "It already did," I said. And then it became interesting. His smile vanished. "You should think about your safety," he said, voice low. And for the first time, I felt fear crawl up my spine. Not because he was scary, but because he was calm. Calm men do terrible things and sleep fine afterward. I stepped closer, just enough that he could see the grease under my fingernails, the calluses on my knuckles, the life I built without asking for his permission. "Listen," I said, "I'm not looking for trouble. But if you or your people step on my property again, I won't be begging the township office to help. I'll be handling it." He stared at me a long moment, then backed down my porch steps like he was memorizing the layout. "Understood," he said. "Good luck, Mr. Rhodes." He walked away, and I watched his taillights disappear, feeling like I'd just argued with a storm cloud. The raid happened the next week. County investigators showed up at Pierce Development's downtown office. The sheriff's department acted like they'd just discovered corruption existed. Boxes got carried out. Computers got seized. Nolan Pierce didn't get handcuffed on camera, not that day, but his name started circulating in the kind of conversations that make powerful men sweat. And you'd think that would be the end. You'd think, Caleb wins, roll credits. But life doesn't wrap itself up like that. The very next night, a patrol car pulled up in front of my house. Two deputies came to my porch, one older, one younger. The older one kept his tone neutral, like he was reading from a script. "Mr. Rhodes," he said, "we need you to answer a few questions." I felt my stomach tighten. "About what?" I asked. The younger deputy stepped forward, eager. "Nolan Pierce hasn't been seen since yesterday," he said. "And a witness reported a truck similar to yours near his office after hours." I stared at him, and for a moment I understood exactly how this works. When the rich get cornered, they flip the board. They make you the story. The older deputy asked, "Where were you last night?" I didn't flinch. I pointed up at my security cameras. "Right here," I said. "All night. And I've got footage." They exchanged a look. The older one sighed like he'd been hoping I'd be scared. "Just don't leave town," he said, and they walked back to their cruiser. I stood on my porch in the humid night air, listening to crickets, watching their lights fade, and I realized the scariest part wasn't the hedge, or the threats, or the suit on my porch. The scariest part was that Nolan Pierce could be missing, and the first instinct of the system was to look at me. The quiet mechanic. The guy without connections. The guy who dared to say no. Now here's where it gets messy. A couple days after that, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, and a voice I didn't recognize said, "You think you won." Then the line went dead. No explanation. No demand. Just a reminder that someone out there was still watching, still angry, still willing to play dirty. Nolan Pierce eventually reappeared, according to rumors. Some folks said he skipped town. Some said he checked into a private rehab. Some said he was hiding out until the heat cooled off. I never got a straight answer. The investigation kept crawling forward, slow as molasses, and the offer letters stopped. The bricks stopped. The tire saboteur types stopped. But the feeling didn't. That feeling that once you stand up, you don't get to sit back down the same way. I rebuilt the hedge, not because I'm sentimental, but because I refuse to let anyone rewrite my boundary. And every morning when I trim it, I still hear that crunch in my head, and I still see my address printed on somebody else's plan like I'm a pawn on their board. So here's my question for you, and I mean it, because I want the comments to get loud on this one. Was I wrong for reinforcing my hedge, knowing it could wreck somebody's vehicle, even if that person had been trespassing and intimidating me for weeks? Or was that exactly what a regular person has to do when the system shrugs and tells you to move your shrubs back? And another one. Do you think men like Nolan Pierce ever face real consequences? Or do they just vanish for a while and come back with a new company name and a bigger smile? Drop your take below. Tell me what you would have done if your home was being tested like that, if you'd been treated like you didn't matter and then finally got one shot to push back. And if you've ever seen a town protect the powerful while blaming the quiet guy, I want to hear that too. Hit like if you think boundaries matter, subscribe if you want more true-to-life stories like this, and don't hold back in the comments. Because right and wrong gets real blurry when somebody decides your life is for sale.